The fluorescent lights in my uncle's conference room were the kind that hum just loud enough to make you feel like you're losing your mind. I'd been sitting in that chair for 20 minutes before he finally walked in, loosened his tie, and told me I was out. Not out as in fired, out as in erased. We're restructuring, he said, sliding a folder across the table without looking at me. Your position is being eliminated. I stared at the folder. Inside was a single sheet, a separation agreement, 60 days of severance, a line for my signature at the bottom. Restructuring, I said. It's nothing personal, Gabe. It was everything personal. My father had built that company from a single delivery truck and a handshake agreement with a local grocery chain. Harmon Freight, 41 years old, still running routes through 4 Midwestern states. My father died 18 months ago and left his shares split between me and my uncle, 49 to 51, 1%. That's all it took. I didn't sign the folder. I pushed it back across the table. My uncle finally looked at me. He had my father's jaw, but none of my father's patience. Don't make this ugly, he said. You're stealing from me, I said. From my father's memory. You know that. He stood up, buttoned his jacket. Security will walk you out. I left before they came. Walked past the dispatch office where I'd spent summers as a kid sorting manifests. Past the loading dock where my dad used to quiz me on freight classifications while we ate gas station sandwiches. Past the parking lot where his name was still stenciled on a reserved space no one had bothered to repaint. I sat in my truck for a long time. The engine ticked in the cold. I had a savings account with about $11,000, a rented apartment, a truck with 200,000 miles on it, and a voicemail from my grandmother's estate attorney that I'd been ignoring for 3 weeks. I called him back. My grandmother, my father's mother, had passed 4 months before my dad did. Back-to-back losses, the kind that hollow you out in ways that don't fully show until you're sitting alone in a parking lot, realizing you have nowhere to be. She'd left behind her property in rural Missouri, 60 acres outside a town called Hardin's Bluff, about 2.5 hours south of Kansas City. The main house had been sitting empty since she moved into assisted living 5 years before she died. The attorney, a quiet man named Mr. Creel, told me the property had passed to me directly. My grandmother had updated her will 8 months before she died, specifically removing my uncle's name and adding mine. Did she say why? I asked. She said you were the one who called, he said. I didn't know what that meant until later. I drove down on a Thursday in early February. The roads got smaller the farther south I went, the landscape opening up into flat brown fields broken by woodlots and rusted grain bins. I turned off the state highway onto a gravel road and followed it for 1.5 miles until I saw the mailbox with the hand-painted numbers my grandmother had put up 30 years ago. The paint was mostly gone. One side of the mailbox had been caved in by something. The house was worse than I expected. The front porch had partially collapsed on the left side, one corner dropping 6 inches where the support post had rotted through. 2 of the windows on the upper floor were broken, the glass replaced with plywood someone had nailed up from the inside. The gutters on the south side had pulled away from the fascia and were hanging at an angle, directing water straight down the siding. I could see the dark staining from 20 feet away. Mold, rot, years of damage. The yard was mostly dead grass and wild sumac that had crept in from the fence line. An old John Deere tractor sat near the barn with a flat rear tire, half buried in leaves. The barn itself looked structurally intact, which was something. I stood in the driveway for a while. My grandmother had made biscuits in that kitchen every Sunday morning for as long as I could remember. She kept a jar of hard candy on the windowsill and a weather radio on top of the refrigerator, and she never once turned off the porch light before 10 o'clock at night. She used to say she left it on so the dark knew it wasn't welcome. I didn't have anywhere else to go. I got my duffel bag out of the truck and went inside. The interior smelled like cold ash and old paper, and something beneath both of those that I couldn't name. The furniture was still there, draped in sheets that had gone gray with dust. The kitchen cabinets were warped at the hinges. The linoleum had buckled near the sink. A section of the living room ceiling, showed water damage in a wide brown ring, the plaster beneath it soft and beginning to sag. But the bones were there. I could feel it the way you can feel when a building still has intention behind it, when it was made by someone who meant for it to last. The floors were old-growth oak, thick and dense even under 40 years of surface wear. The walls were lath and plaster, not drywall, solid in a way that modern construction rarely is. The staircase was hand-built, each baluster turned by hand. My great-grandfather had built this house in 1951. He'd been a carpenter before the war and after it, and he'd put everything he knew into this place. I called my buddy Marcus, not from the file, a different Marcus, an actual friend of mine from college who'd done some contracting work, and asked him to walk through it with me on a video call that evening. He pointed out the things I'd already seen and a few I hadn't. The floor joists in the northeast corner were showing signs of moisture damage. The electrical panel was a Federal Pacific, which he told me needed to come out immediately. The well pump was probably original and would need to be tested before I used the water. "It's fixable," he said. "It's going to take a while and it's going to take money, but the structure is sound. You got lucky." I had $11,000 and no income. Lucky wasn't quite how I'd have put it. I started with what I could do myself. I'm not a contractor, but I grew up watching my father fix things. He was the kind of man who believed that if someone else had built it, you could figure out how it worked. I watched videos on YouTube at night on my phone, propped against the kitchen window where the signal was marginally better. I took notes in a composition notebook I'd found in my grandmother's desk. The porch came first. I pulled the rotted post, sistered the damaged joist, poured a new concrete footing. It took me 4 days and 2 trips to the hardware store in Hardin's Bluff, a small place called Dillard's Supply run by an older man who seemed surprised to see anyone under 60 in his store. He had a habit of asking questions while he found what you needed, which I eventually started to appreciate. He knew the house. He'd known my grandmother. She was a careful woman, he told me one afternoon while he was pulling wire connectors off a shelf. Everything she did, she thought about first. You don't see that much anymore. I thought about that a lot while I worked. The days fell into a pattern. Up before the sun, because the house was cold and sleeping past first light felt wasteful. Coffee on the camp stove I'd brought. Work until dark. Heat water for a sponge bath. Read or watch videos until my eyes gave out. I found a rhythm in it that surprised me. There was something clean about having a task that was physical and finite, something that showed visible progress. Every board I replaced, every window I reglazed, every inch of compromised insulation I pulled out and replaced, it was evidence. It was proof that something had been done. My uncle called twice during the first month. I didn't answer either time. He texted once. "We should talk about a buyout." I didn't respond to that either. By mid-March, I'd addressed the most critical structural issues, replaced the electrical panel with help from a licensed electrician out of the nearest city, and gotten the well pump tested and running clean. The house was still rough, still cold, still more project than home, but it was habitable, in a way it hadn't been when I arrived. I was working on the master bedroom in late March when I found it. My grandmother's bedroom was at the end of the upstairs hall, overlooking the back pasture. It was the largest room in the house, about 14 by 16, with a window seat along the east wall and a closet that ran the full length of the north side. I was pulling up the carpet, old shag, the kind of green that doesn't exist in nature, to check the subfloor condition underneath, when I noticed something off about the closet. I'd been in it a dozen times already. It was deep, maybe 5 feet from the door to the back wall, which made it generously proportioned for a house this age. But standing in it now, I looked at the south wall, and something didn't sit right. The room was 14 feet wide. The hallway outside ran parallel to it. I'd been in the hallway. I knew where the linen closet was. I went out, measured the hallway, came back in, measured the closet. There was a 16-inch discrepancy. I put my hand flat on the south wall of the closet and pressed. It felt like drywall over studs, ordinary construction. I knocked on it, and there it was. That sound, a dull, empty resonance on the far left side, near the floor, compared to the solid knock of a stud bay filled with insulation on the right. I'm not going to pretend I wasn't thinking about termite damage or a plumbing chase. Those were the rational explanations, but I also knew my great-grandfather had been a careful builder, and careful builders don't waste space by accident. And I knew my grandmother had been a careful woman. Everything she did, she thought about first. I went and got my pry bar. The drywall came away in pieces, old and dry, the screws long since rusted in place so that I had to work around them. Behind it was a second wall, older, original plaster on lathe, and set into that wall was a door. Not a hidden door, nothing cinematic, just a small door, maybe 4 feet high, with a simple brass latch that had gone green with age. I had to crouch to get through it. The space on the other side was roughly the size of a large walk-in closet. The floor was bare wood, smooth and clean, which meant it had been sealed off before the dust could get to it. There was a wooden shelf along the back wall. On the shelf were 4 things: a metal strongbox, a canvas bag that had gone stiff with age, a glass jar containing what looked like soil, and a sealed envelope with my name written on it. My name, not my father's, mine, Gabriel. My hands weren't entirely steady when I picked up the envelope. The paper inside was dated 6 years ago. My grandmother's handwriting, which I recognized immediately, she pressed hard with the pen, always, like she was making sure the words would stay. Gabriel, she wrote, if you're reading this, you found the room. I always thought you would be the one. You were the only one who ever asked about the house, what it was made of, how it was built, who made it. Your father asked too, when he was young, but he got busy later. That happens. You never did. The strongbox has a combination. Your birthday, backwards. Inside you'll find some things I've been keeping for a long time. Some of it is financial, some of it is something else. The canvas bag has the original deed to this property, the survey maps, and your great-grandfather's handwritten building plans. Don't lose those plans. An architectural historian at the University of Missouri told me they might be worth something to the right institution. But more than that, they're the record of a man's mind and hands, and I want them kept in the family. The soil is from the garden. I know that sounds foolish, but I want you to have it anyway. Some things don't need an explanation. About your uncle, I know what he is. I've known for a long time. Your father was too loyal to see it clearly, and I loved your father for that loyalty even when it cost him. It cost you too. I'm sorry for that, Gabriel. The documents in the strongbox speak to certain matters related to the company. I had my attorney prepare them. I didn't tell your father because it would have broken something in him that I wasn't willing to break. But you're different. You're harder in the right way. Use them or don't. That's your decision. But I want you to have the choice. The porch light is on for you. Love, Grandma Ruthie sat on the floor of that hidden room for a long time. The strongbox opened on the 3rd try. I'd been entering the digits in the wrong direction. Inside was a folder of documents, and I don't want to overstate what I felt when I started reading through them, but the word that comes closest is gravity. The weight of something that had been a long time coming finally arriving. My grandmother had kept records. Quiet, meticulous, patient records spanning almost a decade. Financial statements from Harmon Freight, cross-referenced with personal expenditures from my uncle's accounts. Real estate transactions my uncle had run through the company's books as operational expenses. A loan my uncle had taken from the company. A significant one, more than $400,000. Never recorded in the official ledger. Documented only in the internal memos my grandmother had somehow obtained and preserved. How she'd gotten them, I didn't know. She'd never said. But they were there, organized in chronological order, annotated in her hard-pressed handwriting. She'd been building a case for years, quietly, in this house, in this room, behind this wall. I called my own attorney the next morning. A woman named Ms. Voss. No, wait. A woman I'd found through a referral, whose name I'll leave out of this. I drove to Kansas City and sat across from her desk and put the folder in front of her and watched her read. She looked up after about 20 minutes. How long has your uncle been running the company? She asked. Since my father died, I said. 18 months. How long has this been going on? She held up a page, My grandmother started documenting about 9 years ago. She set the page down carefully. "Mr. Harmon," she said, "this is significant. I won't walk you through all of it. The legal process is its own story and not a particularly exciting one. What I can tell you is that by early summer, my uncle's attorney was on the phone with my attorney, and by late summer, we were in a conference room that was nothing like the one where he'd slid that separation agreement across the table, and this time, I was the one who didn't have to look at him. His attorney did most of the talking. Mine let her. When there was a pause, mine placed a specific page from my grandmother's folder on the table and let it sit there. My uncle's attorney picked it up, read it, set it down. "My client would like to discuss a settlement," she said. My uncle was looking at the table. He'd aged, I thought. More than 18 months' worth. "I'm not here for a settlement," I said. "I'm here because my father built that company and my grandmother built a case, and I am the only person left who can make either of those things mean something. If your client wants to stay out of a very uncomfortable legal proceeding, he knows what he needs to do." What he needed to do was return the looted funds, surrender his majority position in the company, and resign from the board. In exchange, we didn't pursue criminal charges. His attorney called it a mutual agreement. I called it my grandmother's last gift. I drove back to Hardin's Bluff that evening. Took the state highway the whole way, no interstate, watching the light change over the flat fields as the sun went down. By the time I turned onto the gravel road, it was full dark. I went up on the porch. The repaired porch, level now, solid underfoot, and I turned the porch light on. In the month that followed, I finished the house. Properly finished it. Refinished the oak floors down to bare wood, let them breathe for a week, then laid 3 coats of oil-based finish. Rebuilt the kitchen cabinets with lumber I had milled from 2 dead oaks I'd taken down from the fence line. New windows throughout, double pane, properly flashed and sealed. I hired a local plasterer named Gene, a retired man who'd been doing it since before I was born, to repair the ceilings throughout the 2nd floor, and watching him work was like watching a kind of craft that doesn't get transmitted much anymore. The barn became a workshop. I put in a wood stove and a proper electrical circuit, and a wall of pegboard for tools I was slowly accumulating. I found I liked working with my hands in a way I hadn't known before all of this started. Or maybe I'd always liked it, and just hadn't had the occasion. The tractor turned out to be a 1968 John Deere 1020, and the man at the co-op in town told me that with some work it was worth restoring. I haven't gotten to it yet. It's still parked beside the barn with its flat tire, but now it feels less like a problem and more like a project waiting for me. I'm running Harmon Freight now. Not from the corporate office in the city. I go there 2 or 3 days a week, and the rest I do from the house on Grandma Ruth's property, from an office I set up in what used to be the formal sitting room. I kept the weather radio on top of the refrigerator. I moved the jar of candy to the windowsill. Same window, same light. I don't know what kind of candy she would have filled it with, but I get the hard mixed kind, the kind in the wrappers that come in a big bag, and I keep it full. The property records and the survey maps and my great-grandfather's building plans are at the University of Missouri now, on indefinite loan to the architecture department. They sent me a letter saying they were remarkable. I already knew that. The jar of soil from my grandmother's garden is on my desk. I told you it didn't need an explanation, and I meant it. I look at it sometimes when I'm on a call that's going sideways, or when I'm tired, or when the work feels heavier than it should. It centers something in me that I didn't know needed centering. Before everything happened, I used to think inheritance was about money, about what you were left. I know now that's the smallest part of it. What my grandmother left me was a room behind a wall, a folder of documents, a jar of garden soil, and a letter that told me I was the one who asked the right questions. Turns out that's enough to rebuild from. The porch light is on.